Aloha, my family. It is your girl T, aka the Nappy Head Jojoba, here today with a bit of a compare and contrast. You already know what it is. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. I'm comparing two hot brushes. In particular, I am comparing the Revlon Pro Collection Salon One Step Hair Dryer and Styler. I think pretty much all of us in the Afro textured natural hair community have seen this by now. I've actually had this for quite some time, but typical fashion, I am very reticent to try new things with my hair, especially when they are heat tools. So this has been sitting around in my stash probably since like February of this year, maybe even January. Locally from Target, it was $27.98 on clearance, if you can see that little clearance sticker, but the actual MSRP is $39.99. You probably still can get this locally from Targets, but I know you can't get it at mine because I was just in there and they don't have it. Once they got rid of these, they never restocked it. So I think some Targets will have it, some will not, and you can probably find it on Amazon and places like that. Regardless, I will link it below. I will be comparing that product to this, which is a thermal straightening brush by some random ass company that I have never heard of, Philosophy of Hair, whatever. I have tried to Google this product and it does not seem to be available because I've had this brush even longer than I've had this one. I checked and I actually purchased this online in 2016 at some point. So clearly the moral of the story is I stress myself out far too much when it comes to trying new tools on my hair. It happened with curl formers. It's happened with both of these brushes. I'm threatened by change, you guys. Let's get down to brass tacks and actually compare these two brushes and see which one I like better. If you've ever seen me review anything, you guys know that I am thorough, excessively so. But it's just because I want to try to preemptively answer any questions that you guys may wind up having so that you don't have to hope that I see them in the comments and get back to you, because I like to have everything self-contained if I can. To prep my hair, I decided to do a curl former set, and I actually used my bootleg curl formers because I've done a compare and contrast videos on curl formers versus bootleg curl formers as well, as a matter of fact. I'll link that right here if you've never seen it. But in that video, I basically discovered that because the bootleg curl formers are much stiffer, you can kind of get a somewhat straighter result, potentially, depending on your hair texture. They're also a lot less comfortable on the hair and scalp, but nonetheless, I felt like they were the better option to do sort of a level 1 stretch on my hair. So that's what I did. I did wind up sitting under my dryer for about an hour, and I also, much to my chagrin, panicked and decided to sleep in them and got probably 2 hours of sleep that night because I really hate sleeping in curl formers because it's pretty much impossible to do, especially the bootleg ones, but I was just really worried that my hair wasn't going to be 100% dry and I didn't want to risk it. The next day, I split my hair into two, and I did one side with the thermal straightening brush and I did the other side with the Revlon brush. I started with the thermal straightening brush on this side of my head, so let me just talk through my thoughts on that, and then I'll talk about the other side where I use the Revlon brush in a moment. This brush has a digital temperature gauge, which is great, and it is a thermal straightening brush, so it's a little different. Whereas the Revlon brush blows hot air, this actually just heats up here on the base, where the bristles are connected, and then when your hair makes contact with that base, it helps to break up those sulfide bonds in your hair and basically straighten your hair. The buttons to turn it on and control the temperature are right here, which I found to be an awkward spot because this is also where you're just holding the brush as you're trying to use it. So I found myself hitting the buttons accidentally quite a bit whilst I was trying to use the brush. However, that wasn't a huge problem because with this one, and even though I wasn't able to find this exact brush on the internet, I found one that is pretty much the exact same brush and cheaper than what I paid for it on Amazon. So I'll link that in the description box for you guys because it's not the same company, but it's the same exact damn brush. As I was saying, the power button, you have to hold it down for a couple of seconds, like 3 seconds or so for it to turn on. And in order to change the temperature, you can't really just do it anytime you want. The only time you can change the temperature is right after you've turned it on. You can either raise or lower it from whatever it was set to the last time you used the brush. But once you set that temperature, that's it. So if you want to raise it or lower it during that one session that you're using the brush, you'll have to turn it off and then turn it back on and then immediately set it to higher or lower from what you want. By the way, the maximum temperature is 450, and I believe the lowest, I can't quite recall because I did test to see how low it would go, but I think it was around 200 or 250 degrees, somewhere in that neighborhood. So even though the buttons are in an awkward spot and you hit them accidentally a lot whilst using the brush, it doesn't really matter because you have to go through that whole protocol for them to actually do anything when you press them. One thing I like about this brush is that it's quiet. So once it turns on and you're using it, there isn't any noise of any fans or anything that you have to have blaring in your ear whilst you're using it. I also found it to be very fast to use, faster than the blow dry side, which I'll get to later. But based on my sort of method of having my hair somewhat pre-stretched, or actually fairly pre-stretched with the curl formers, I was able to get through this side of my head in like half an hour, probably less, just going section by section. Essentially, as you're seeing in these clips, I would just take one section that was a curl former and straighten each one at a time, just doing one pass with the thermal brush. And doing it that way, you know, after doing a quick comb through with my regular comb to make sure all the tangles were out, I could easily follow it up with this. And I mean, it was just cycling right through it and very easy for me to do. I was kind of shocked at how easy it was for me to straighten my hair because it's something I never do because it seems so labor intensive and time consuming and stressful. And while it is still fairly labor intensive because I do like to have my hair stretched with the curl formers first, so that's its own process, I still found that it was pretty easy once I had prepped my hair to actually just go in with this and get it really much more straight. I could see myself getting through my whole head with this thing on a curl former set, of course, not just going in, you know, straight after my hair had been dried in braids or twists, but with a curl former set, I could easily see myself getting my whole head done with this in under an hour, doing one pass and still have a pretty good result. The temperature I used was 350 degrees because that's still pretty hot to me. I know a lot of people, if you have a hair texture like mine, would immediately think, let me just go for the hottest one, but I ain't trying to burn my hair off, so I felt like 350 was plenty hot. And I'm not trying to get a bone straight result. I just wanted my hair to be straight enough for someone else to be able to braid it. Despite the fact that I used this at 350 degrees, I did not notice any smoke coming off of my hair. The only time I saw smoke was from the hair that would get trapped in here because once this thing is on, it's quite hot, so you can't really clean out any hair strands that get trapped in here. And honestly, I feel like it'll be hard to clean even now that it's not plugged in and it's totally off. Like I can still see a little bit of product on the base here, and I saw that smoking off the brush when I would just have it to the side when I was, you know, getting my next section ready to detangle or whatever. But I did not see any smoke coming off of my hair whilst I was actually brushing through, which I thought was really nice because people are saying, oh, that's just the heat protectant when they're actually frying their hair. Of course I use the heat protectant with my hair, but I don't want to see any smoke coming off of my hair that is still attached to my head, period. Even though I didn't have this at its maximum temperature, this entire portion of the brush gets quite hot even on the backside. So that is something to keep in mind because, you know, if you rest it on a surface that can burn or something, you do want to be careful. So maybe just have a pad or a towel or something that you lay it down on when you're not actually holding it in your hand. Because this brush is from some random ass company that no one's ever heard of, the instructions are quite useless. Mostly it's just warnings about like not using it in the shower. And the instructions, I'll read them to you because it does not tell you how to actually operate this thing at all. Achieve straight, sleek results in a single brush stroke. On dry hair, glide the thermal styling brush as you would a brush to instantly create frizz-free straight results. In other words, those instructions say, use the thermal brush like a brush. Helpful. Luckily, it is pretty user friendly and easy to figure out, so I didn't find that to be too much of a problem. I do wish they explained how to clean this thing after use. I mean, it's one thing to pick the hairs out, but the heat protectant residue that I can see on the base of the brush, am I supposed to go in there with like a Q-tip and just kind of scrub through? I'm not exactly sure how I'm meant to clean this. It takes somewhere between 1 and 3 minutes to reach the temperature that you set it to, depending on how high you set it, so that's something to remember as well. And because of the nature of the shape of this thing, you can't really get flush with the roots of your hair, which, I mean, it's got this sort of beveled edge here, so I don't think you would necessarily want to get nuts to butts with your scalp with something that's hot. So I was okay with that, especially since my hair had already been pre-stretched from the curl former set that had gotten my roots fairly straight to begin with, so it wasn't critical. And also, again, I wasn't looking for a bone straight result, but that is something to bear in mind. And finally, the ends of my hair did not get nearly as straight as the rest. That is largely due to the fact that I need a trim. I have not trimmed my hair since I cut my hair in January. Many of you who are my ride or dies already know that I gave myself quite a cut. I cut my hair to about 14 inches all around in January, except for in the front and the nape. I cut that to 12, as well as my side that used to be shaved, which is my right side. I do not remember what I cut that to. I might have just trimmed that portion so it would be a little bit more even with the longer rest of my hair. In any event, I need a trim is the point. So that was really highlighted by the fact that this doesn't get your ends super straight on its own. Perhaps if you tried like a comb chase with a brush, I don't know if that would even make sense, where you're chasing a comb with a brush, but maybe the comb chase method would work or something like that. But really the answer for me is I need a damn trim. Once that side was done, I just tucked it away and moved on to this side. So let's talk about the Revlon brush side. Because this is essentially a blow dryer where the top is shaped like a brush instead of your usual blow dryer opening, you can obviously use this on wet or damp hair as well as dry hair, which is a nice option. It's also got a much larger face or head compared to the thermal brush. So if you like, you could do much larger sections. I would never do super big sections because of the texture of my hair and how prone to breakage my hair is. So that's just my choice. And honestly, because I know that I would always be using small sections, as you see in these clips, it's actually kind of hard for me to use this because the head is so big. It's almost too big for the size of sections that work with my hair. Unlike the thermal brush, there's basically no wait time for it to heat up. You know, you turn it on, it's got a cool setting, a low and a high, and you turn it on and it's pretty much at temperature in a couple seconds. Unlike the thermal brush, the bristles on this are very flexible, which I really like, because you definitely, if you've got kinky, curly hair, flexibility is critical in terms of mitigating the amount of breakage you'll experience when you're combing through or detangling your hair. So flexibility is always good because you want that bit of give. I do not like the little balls on the ends of the bristles, though, that you see on the average paddle brush, because to me, that's just another opportunity to snag my hair. You know, these little balls seem like the perfect size for my little kinks and curls to get snagged on. Because once you shut this off, it doesn't necessarily stay super hot. It's easy to clean your hair strands out as you're using it. You know, once I had finished brushing through a section, I turn it off, either prep my next section and then clean it out, or clean it out and then prep my next section. So that was nice. When using this brush, once you turn it on, the heat only comes from about this portion. It comes from the top of the brush. Down here, I don't even know if any air is blowing at all, but if it is, it's just cool air. So really, the only part of the brush that is doing the work, and there went the sun, sorry guys. When you're using this, the only part of the brush that's actually doing any work is going to be this part. So you really have to make sure that the hair you're trying to straighten, and the sun is coming back, you need to make sure that the hair you're actually trying to straighten is making contact, all of it, you know, all of it in that section needs to be making contact with this area of the brush. Otherwise, nothing's really happening. You're basically just brushing your hair. Because I was working with such small sections and this thing is so big, that made it very difficult for me to get the brush position just right, to make sure I was getting as close to my roots as possible, getting that, you know, little strip, maybe 1.5-inch size strip of hair aligned with the top of the brush, and then brushing through to the bottom. So it's pretty hard to maneuver this thing when compared with the thermal brush, because at least with that one, it doesn't really matter what part of the brush you're getting your hair against, and it's also smaller. I found myself wasting a lot of time trying to make sure I had this brush positioned just right for the section that I was working on. And much like with the thermal brush, I was doing only one pass. I don't want to fuck up my hair and get heat damage. And I also wanted to keep things as apples to apples as possible. Realistically, I wouldn't be doing multiple passes anyway because it's just not that important to me. Another thing I didn't like about this is you have no idea what temperature it is, which is typical with most blow dryers. So it's not going to have a digital temperature gauge, but that does give another point to the thermal brush because you can set it to whatever temperature you wish. Whereas with this one, you've got either low heat or high heat, and God only knows what temperatures those actually are. Just like with the other brush, it's very hard to get to your roots with this, but I would say it's even harder because the ledge from where the actual hot air is coming out to the edge of the brush, I mean, that's at least, I would say, a good centimeter that you won't really be able to get down to your roots because of that distance from, if you put this flush against your scalp, you know, you've got all that distance from where the bottom of my palm is sitting to where the air starts coming out and where the actual bristles are that are going to help stretch that hair as it's making contact with the hot air. So that kind of sucks. Similarly, because of my need of a trim, my ends were quite frizzy and not looking the best. I can't really fault either brush with that, but it certainly is a consideration. Despite being able to clean this out throughout the process of using it, this one did cause my hair to smoke a couple times, which damn near gave me a heart attack. So even though there wasn't any hair in here or any product that I can see, it actually looks quite clean after using it. My hair smoked a couple times when I was brushing through a couple of sections, and I did not like that at all. Ultimately, this took longer, was harder to use, and gave me a kinkier result. When I compared my hairballs from each side, you know, the amount of hair that was shed or broken using the thermal brush versus what I got on this side with the Revlon brush, they were about the same. Even though the shed/broken hairballs were about the same, this also was just kind of blowing stray hairs all over my bathroom while I was using it. So some of them probably didn't make it into the hairball for this. So even though it looks like it might be a bit smaller, I feel like the ones that wound up on my floor or somewhere should be taken into account, and I would say that the hairballs were probably about the same in the end. When I was all done, I did see lots of little short hairs all over my bathroom counter as well, which is obvious breakage. Like when the hairs are really, really short, that's obvious breakage. So that's just something to bear in mind because heat styling always comes with risks, and it's why I hardly ever do it. It is also why I take so much precaution when I'm going to do it with using heat protectants that actually contain silicones and things like that. It wasn't a crazy heart-stopping type of amount of broken little short hairs all over, but it was just a reminder like, bitch, don't do this too much. Another thing I didn't like about this is just how loud it was. I mean, if I was like right here working on my hair, I honestly was worried about hearing damage. So this thing is crazy loud. I started off using it on low, and then after trying that on the first section with one pass, I felt like it did next to nothing. So I immediately switched to high and used that for my entire head. And it was high and it was loud. Based on the features, my experience using both of these, and my final result, for me, the clear winner is the thermal straightening brush. I will absolutely be using this again the next time I need to entrust my tresses to another person. I was really delighted with how well it did on my hair. You know, obviously these little bristles are not nearly as flexible as the ones on here, but because I took such care to make sure my hair was very well detangled, I didn't really have too much trouble with that. And I know that once I finally trim my hair, which I'll do once I take these braids out in a couple weeks, it's going to be an even bigger breeze to use this thing, especially when compared to this thing. Not only do I like this one better than this one is also cheaper. I've seen this for as cheap as $22. And I got this on clearance, and it was still more expensive even at a clearance price than this is. So there you have it. That's a no-brainer for me. If you have different needs and preferences, this may be better for you if you actually are trying to blow dry your hair from a damp or wet state. This is probably the better option because this can only be used on dry hair, but I will never blow dry my hair from wet, and I have talked about that already in the past. I'll link the video where I go into depth on why I don't blow dry my hair from wet ever here. Nonetheless, I wanted to get my hair cornrowed, and I knew that in order for there to be the least damage done possible to my real hair, I needed to get my hair as close to straight as possible, as close to sort of a blowout state. I wasn't going to flat iron my hair. I don't know the last time I flat ironed my hair, but it's been probably like a decade. Here you can see I can't cornrow worth a damn, so if I want cornrows, I have to go to someone to do it. I found a braider who I trusted to cornrow my hair earlier this year, probably back in January or February, and I love her and she's fabulous. I wanted to have her braid my hair again this time around, and I booked an appointment with her, and due to black salon bullshit, I showed up for my appointment yesterday and found out that she had been out of town for 2 weeks. Mind you, I booked my appointment about 5 days ago. Anyway, still got my hair braided, and I was definitely happy that I gotten my hair to a blown out straight-ish state, especially since the person who wound up braiding my hair was not gentle at all. But I'm actually really happy that I bought this. I'm really sad that it took me so long to finally try it out, but I'm happy to have it in my collection and in my stash because it's going to be very handy the next time I want someone to braid my hair, which based on the experience I had yesterday will not be anytime soon, but it's still good to know. And that is going to do it for this one. I hope this was helpful for you guys if you were curious about that Revlon brush. I know I've even had 1 or 2 people ask me to try out the Revlon brush. I'm sorry it took me so long because I bought it even before I started getting requests because I was so just intrigued by the design, but fear got the better of me and it's been sitting in my apartment for ages. That is gonna do it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.
That's a nappy-headed hose there, I'm gonna tell you that now.